Hi, everyone. This is Betska, the Guru Coach, together with my co-host, who is looking very handsome today, Raj Vashisht from Delhi, India. I'm from Vancouver Island, Canada, and this is Mindful Leadership Beyond Borders podcast. Welcome to everyone. Our guest today is Jon-Paul Gabriele, and let me tell you a bit about him. He's a chartered PR practitioner with 15 years of crisis management experience. I'm sure it's going through your mind, well, what does that mean? What does crisis management experience mean? So we'll talk about that. He holds a degree in disaster management and has been in the room when real crises are actually running. From major incidents with the emergency services, I'm assuming that's in a hospital, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. To corporate boardrooms during reputational storms. Wow, what a good title. He's the founder of Crisis City, based in Newcastle upon Tyne, UK, which provides operational resilience consulting and has developed platform organizations used to run simulations and prepare for any crisis. Whew, that's important. He has learned that how a crisis is supposed to run and how it actually runs are rarely the same. I found that intriguing. His work sits in that gap. I understand how people feel when they are inside one. This is him speaking, not just how the model says they should behave. Wow. So, JP, you gave us permission to call you JP.
Absolutely.
Give us some examples of crises.
Yeah, it's a very broad spectrum. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to speak to you both. So
Mm-hmm.
there's various things that will constitute a crisis. So things people are probably more familiar with are those like severe weather events. So we're seeing
Yeah.
that a lot in Europe at the minute. You're probably very familiar over in your neck of the woods with forest fires, wildfires,
Mm-hmm.
pandemics, any other severe winter weather. So they're the kind of ones that I think people are most used to. But
Mm-hmm.
then the more that we're starting to get into AI and into reliance on technology, we're seeing a lot of cyber attacks and cyber related crises that affect businesses
Yeah.
directly. So
Mm.
we're kind of on the kind of cusp between there's a crisis that can affect like global populations or regional populations, and then there's ones that can be more business specific, which could still have quite a lot of connotations down the supply chain. But yeah, it can be quite localized or quite widespread. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a wide variety. We could talk all day about the different types.
Well, we have seen definitely an uptick in the number of weather crises, Japan just having another earthquake and earthquakes around the world. I mean, you must be really busy. And I was speaking with a friend just yesterday from France, of course, the wildfires, they were going crazy. And she used a phrase. She said, Europe is on fire.
Mhm. Yeah.
She said all of her plants in her garden are dead. The heat they have had four, well, you're in the midst of all that, four heat waves already, and more to come. She said the weather hovers around 40 degrees all throughout these last couple of months, and rarely did it go even down to 30. And I think 30 is really hot.
Yeah.
So, wow. How did you get into this? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's people often ask me that question because it's quite an like a niche industry to be
Yeah,
in. So
yeah.
originally, when I wanted to grow up, I wanted to be a fireman. So that was always like
Mm.
that's what I wanted to be. Apart from being a professional soccer player, that was the first one. But when that I knew that dream wasn't going to happen, it was a fire service. Um, and I applied, and what I was told is you need a bit more life experience because I was quite young at the time, and then so I
Mm.
started looking around. Well, is university an option? And then I ended up finding this course that was disaster management. I was like, that sounds perfect. It's aligned to what I wanted to do. So
Mm.
went and had a look at the university, and I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. So in that course, we kind of did a lot of like emergency planning. which is to do with more of like fire, police, ambulance, local authority, and
Mm.
then disaster relief. So we covered a lot of
Yeah.
that. And then I was lucky enough, as part of the course, we had like a gap year where you go and work in the industry. So I worked at Camden Council, which is in London, and it was the year before the Olympics. So I was involved in a lot of the planning for like the torch relay route and the things like counter-terrorism planning and things like that. So it was a
Yeah.
perfect year to be out where like there was so much going on.
Mm.
And that really kind of solidified that yes, I want to go and do this as like my career. And I kind of
Mm.
then fell in between going through the public sector. I worked in the NHS, and in healthcare,
Mhm.
and then I've
Yeah.
worked in the private sector as well. So I've got like that nice mix between helping the public on the front line, as well as helping businesses that are more. It's more about your reputation and your financial planning side of things. So it's been
Yeah.
quite a nice chop and change in between the two.
One thing that really touches me is let's look at the wildfires, for example, and how the dedication, the commitment, and the sacrifice that these frontline workers make every day. They're walking saints, I tell you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they could lose their lives in an instant. You see pictures of a fire person, and right ahead of him, he or she is dressed in their gear, and right ahead is this wall of flames.
Mm,
And
yeah. It,
I
it
tip my hat. I say thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. It takes a very special personality type to kind of everyone tends to run away from a fire or run away from an incident.
Yeah, yeah,
Emergency services, the military, that they're the opposite. They'll
yeah,
run towards it to protect everybody else, and
yeah.
it takes a very specific kind of. It's very courageous for a start, but it takes a very specific personality set, and yeah, absolutely all credit to them because I've seen the dedication that they put in, and it's almost like the front line as well. But I have a very close friend, my best friend. He works in the police on the call centers,
Oh
so to
yeah.
have to listen to the emergency calls coming all of
Mm,
the time, and people are having possibly the worst day of their lives, and they
yeah,
have
yeah.
to, and that in itself, you might not be on the front line at the incident, but to hear, sometimes it can be worse because
Yeah.
you're having that phone call and you're having to be calm for somebody that is experiencing some major trauma in the majority of cases.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's fantastic what they do, and I think the yeah they deserve a lot more pay and credit than I would say that they get globally.
They do. They do. I mean, and how do they prepare for that? Like,
Mm.
what characteristics do they need to have? What, you know, personalities do they have to have in order to be there for someone? They put their needs aside,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they are there for the person on the other end of that call who is about to commit suicide, right?
Yeah.
Or, the firemen or police officers. My God, every day, you know,
Yeah.
like how do you even train for that?
A lot of repetition, I would say. So
Yeah.
it's kind of what they say is like the more they train, then becomes muscle memory. And then that helps them be
Ah,
able to
okay.
compartmentalize. Because what
Yeah.
you need to do, it sounds awful, but you almost have to detach yourself from the
Hmm.
emotion of the situation because you've got a job to do, and that is the job, no matter who is on the end of the phone or like at the scene that you're trying to deal with.
Yeah.
If you let the emotions get on top of you, then you'll be no use to anybody. You won't be able to manage the incident.
No,
And
that's
a
right.
good thing
Yeah.
that what happens is we kind of do when I do the training is everybody has this reaction, and it's like you hit the basement. It's that horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach that you get, when everything just sinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody experiences that in like traumatic events, but where
Mm-hmm.
the emergency services in particular and the military are so good at, they get themselves out of that situation very quickly. And that's because they can go back onto the
Yeah.
training that they've done. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've had my
Yeah.
moment, get myself out of this.
Yeah.
There's a job to do. I
Yeah.
know I have to do this, and
Mm.
this. And then it goes into like autopilot onto the training that they've done. So it's again the fire service, the military, the police, they'll constantly train day in day out. So it
Mm,
just no fire's the same, no incident's the same, but the processes are very
mm.
similar.
I was married for a short time, only about 7 years, to a, a medical doctor in England who worked for
Mm,
the NHS, and he came home one day just a basket case because he had lost his first patient,
mm,
and it took a lot of consoling and holding his hand, and like it had never happened. It was a shock. It was incredibly traumatic for him.
mhm.
And but as you say, I mean, they have to go through that and rely on their training, but he didn't want to lose any patient.
No, yeah,
You know, that's their goal, of course, but in dire situations, I mean, it's God's will. It's going to happen. So, you know,
yes, absolutely,
yeah,
yeah, and it
yeah,
is that, and that's kind of you have your cry, you have your emotions, and I think that's why I think it's becoming more people are becoming more aware of the mental health side of things as well, especially in it's like, well, sometimes they might have options to have counseling and kind of if they've had that kind of traumatic experience and go and
hmm
talk it out with somebody that isn't your family. Because it can have
yeah.
an impact on your family life as well when you're in the
Oh, yes.
emergency services. It's a
hmm
tough burden for the person, but it's also for their family members and their loved ones as well. That they have to help with that aspect at home, which it's because you can't. It is. It's easy to say just switch off and forget about it and move on, but that's
hmm
it's not always the case. It's very difficult.
So, do you actually train people in those fields on crisis and how to handle it? What specifically do you do?
Yeah, so at the minute I'm focused more on the private sector. I'd love to go back with the emergency services. But
Oh,
when I used to work, they were called the Civil Contingencies Unit. And what
mm.
that was, it was like a central team, and we coordinated with all of the emergency services. So we were like that central hub. And we'd run
Ah,
like live exercises. We actually did
mhm.
the first of its kind of an evacuation of a hospital. So, and that was
Oh,
a live evacuation. So we had like
wow.
everybody turned up. We had people role playing and pretending to be injured. Because what
Wow.
they do in hospitals, they do what's called evacuation. So they'll move if there's ever a fire, they'll move inwards through the hospital because they've got all the fire doors as you'd expect.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
buys you time. And then we practice, well, okay, well, what if you get to the end of that and there's nowhere else to go and the fire's still going across?
Mm,
So that was amazing to be a part of. And it was what we found was the fire service in particular found that so valuable because they're used to training with like with dummies, really. So to try and carry
yeah.
them out, they don't move.
hmm Mm,
You haven't got that aspect of the human element. So when we had these people who were role playing, perhaps wandered off places and or were difficult to carry, it gave them that extra dynamic of how it would be in reality. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was phenomenal. It ended up being on the news because it was like again, it was the first of its kind.
Mm,
They're the kind of things that I miss being able to train the emergency services. But
mm,
it's just the work I do now, which is predominantly private sector, still
yeah.
just as important because the private sector don't have that level of training and repetition that the emergency services do. The emergency services get to
Okay.
train on this every single day.
Yeah.
Private sector, they've got their job to do. So this
hmm
becomes a an addition, and it's like, well, do we really need to do this? Because they're not on the front line. So that's
mm.
where the differences become. So it's a bit more challenging in the private sector, I would say.
So, um, give us an example of what you would do in your current role then. What happens if you go into a corporation and what are they asking you to do?
So the current role, it tends to be like the senior leaders, like so the key decision
Ah,
makers in a
hmm
business. So
yeah.
what the platform that I've built within Crisis City, it allows us to be able to create these simulations where we take them through a supply chain disruption or a deep fake of one of the key employees or a PR scandal. Whatever, I'd sit with them first and I'd say, okay, what keeps you
Mm.
up at night? What are you really worried about in your business? So then
Yeah.
I can tailor the exercise to that. And then we deliver it on the platform. There's like different, we can simulate breaking news coming through, we can simulate emails. So everything feels realistic.
Hmm.
So we create this,
Wow.
yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, we create this like pressured environment where they
Mm.
can make mistakes. And the key thing is they can make mistakes. And that's
Yes.
what I always tell them is like, this is like a playground, for want of a better word, where they can
Yeah.
practice, they can fail.
Mm.
I'll assess them, and the team will assess them and say, okay, here's what you did really well. Here's what you perhaps need to improve on. And then they get that continuous improvement that the platform then will show them with the algorithms that we use to say like
Mm.
these are the kind of aspects of crisis response that you need to then train. And then we can go
Mm.
back in and train them and provide that like depth of training for them, whether it be PR training, whether it be help them to write the plans that they would need to respond. So there's a wide range of things that we'll work with the company for, to kind of
Wow.
fill their gaps.
Wow. That sounds fascinating.
It is.
Well, listen, JP, we're going to take a brief pause and
Yep.
we're going to come back. We have so many other questions to ask you. Thank you for
Thank you.
founding Crisis City. It sounds like a great service you're providing. So we'll be right back, folks.
Thank you.